Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty powerful this time, the Book of Lamentations. But we're not just reading it, we're going deep with scholarly commentary to uncover the raw emotion and historical context. It's like getting a backstage pass to one of the most heart-wrenching pieces of poetry ever written.
I like that. A backstage pass will definitely be uncovering layers you wouldn't catch on a casual read.
Right from the start, the book sets a somber tone with that exclamation, "Alas." Now, a simple alas might not seem like much, but the commentary points out it's a direct echo of ancient Hebrew funeral laments. You know, those cries of grief over losing a loved one.
Exactly. And the prophets borrowed that intensity, applying it to Jerusalem's destruction. It's as if they're saying, this isn't just a city that's fallen, it's like a death in the family.
Wow, that sets the stage for something profound. And then in Lamentations 1.1, we get the phrase, great of people, which, according to the commentary, is doing double duty.
Absolutely. It contrasts Jerusalem's bustling past with its empty present. On one hand, it highlights the city's glory, maybe even acting as a title, but it also emphasizes the scale of the loss, how empty the city has become.
It's like a punch to the gut. And the blows keep coming in 1.2, where Jerusalem is depicted as a widow. But the commentary points out the calf prefix changes everything.
It's not like a widow. She is a widow now. Final. Her protector, her provider, gone. And then there's that wordplay on Sarah, meaning princess, reminding us of Jerusalem's lost authority.
So it's not just losing her husband, but her whole kingdom, her status, everything. This is heavy. And then in 1.5, the commentary highlights the subjective genitive. Grammar isn't my strong suit, but the way you explained it.
Think of it as emphasizing Jerusalem's role in her downfall. It's not just that bad things happened, but that her actions had consequences. Her rebellions, her splendor. These point to her choices contributing to the tragedy.
So it's a more nuanced view of suffering. It's not just being a victim, but this idea of accountability. And when it talks about splendor leaving Zion, it's not just about material wealth, right?
No, it's a metaphor for the exile of her children and leaders, her very essence ripped away.
Okay, we've seen metaphors, but in 1.7 we get her impoverished homelessness, which the commentary calls a nominal hendiades, another poetic tool.
It is. Two nouns combined to create a single gut-wrenching image, like starving orphans instead of just poor children. Here, it paints a picture of the utter destitution of Jerusalem's people. They've lost everything. Home, security, even basic necessities.
And then in 1.8, there's a sudden shift. The commentary says we go from a third-person account to a direct cry to God.
Like the narrator can't contain their emotions anymore, breaking through the narrative to address God. And the word enter, which the commentary highlights as having a sexual connotation, adds another layer of violation to the destruction of the temple.
So it's not just a building desecrated, but like a personal assault on the city, on God. And then 1.9 goes further with that line about menstrual flow.
It's unsettling imagery, but effective. The commentary suggests it's not just physical uncleanliness, but sin, shame, the consequences of Jerusalem's actions staining her.
It's definitely not shying away. And in 2.1, we encounter footstool of his feet, which I'm learning is never just about furniture in the Bible.
Right. It's a figurative reference to the temple. God disregarding his footstool symbolizes his anger, his judgment. He's withdrawing protection, turning away from his own sacred space.
It's like saying, even my house isn't holy enough now. And in 2.4, the commentary highlights he bent his bow.
God as a warrior about to unleash his wrath. It's chilling, but it also paints a picture of the force behind this judgment. It's deliberate, a consequence of actions. And in 2.8, even the city gates get personified.
Sinking into the ground like they're dying with everything else.
And there's another poetic combo, a verbal hendies, in he has destroyed and smashed her bars, emphasizing the brutality, how thorough the destruction was.
We've covered a lot and it's heavy, but there are these glimmers of insight. In 2.11, there's that line, my eyes are worn out from weeping. The commentary explains the Hebrew word kala suggests more than crying. It's like the eyes themselves are exhausted from grief.
It's a powerful image, capturing that feeling of being overwhelmed by sorrow, like you've cried yourself empty. And right alongside this, the writer uses a Hebrew idiom for severe stomach distress.
My bowels burn, intense. But the commentary explains it conveys the physical manifestation of grief. It's not just in the mind, it affects the body.
Suffering isn't just emotional, it's physical. And as we go into chapter 3, there's a shift in the acrostic structure. Now, all 3 lines in each verse begin with the corresponding letter. Subtle, but it adds intensity.
Like the grief is increasing with every verse. The commentary also mentions a debate about who's speaking in this chapter. Some say a defeated soldier, others a more universal voice. What do you think?
It's interesting. Both interpretations have merit. The language is vivid and personal, but the themes of loss, despair, searching for meaning, they resonate with everyone in Jerusalem.
So maybe both. A personal lament, but universal.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful, so relevant even today. Those deep human experiences that transcend time.
It makes me think about 3.3, to turn the hand against. The commentary explains it's not just opposition, but deliberate aggression, turning away from help.
It's rejection, being abandoned when you need it most. And it ties into that question of responsibility. If Jerusalem was partly responsible for her downfall, did it justify this abandonment?
Tough question, and the book doesn't shy away. And in 3.4, another poetic combo, the nominal hen deities with my mortal skin.
Right, emphasizing vulnerability, fragility in the face of suffering, and that's underscored in 3.13, with God shooting arrows into the kidneys.
Powerful image, but confusing. Yeah. Why the kidneys?
The commentary says in Hebrew thought, kidneys were linked to emotions. So it's not just physical, but an attack on the emotional core. Visceral way of showing all-encompassing suffering.
Intense. And in 3.22, there's waiting and silently. The commentary says it conveys endurance. Even amidst pain, there's a flicker of hope things will get better.
The resilience of the human spirit, finding strength in darkness. But what are they waiting for? Just for the pain to end or something more?
Great question. We'll explore that. But that line in 3.38, is it not from the mouth of the Most High that both calamities and good things come? God as source of both.
One of the most challenging verses. The commentary says it's not about God enjoying suffering, but that he controls all things, comforting and terrifying.
It's a lot to think about, but that's Lamentations. It doesn't shy away, forces us to confront faith, suffering, the nature of God.
Exactly. And as we move into chapter 4, those questions become even more urgent. Gold losing its luster, sons of Zion like broken pots, Jerusalem's beauty ravaged by hunger.
Heartbreaking. And 4.10, one of the most disturbing images. Women driven to cannibalism. The desperation, the breakdown of everything.
It's horrifying what happens when society collapses, pushed to the limits. It asks about humanity, civilization, the consequences of violence.
Tough chapter. But Lamentations isn't about shock value. It's about the depth of suffering, grief, the complexities of faith in tragedy. Honesty makes it relevant.
Absolutely. And in chapter 5, that honesty extends to a collective lament, a cry for justice that resonates throughout history. But we'll save that for part 2. It's amazing how, even in this devastation, Lamentations weaves in these little details that add so much depth.
Right, like in 1.11, where the commentary points out a connection to Deuteronomy. That line about enemies seeing Jerusalem's nakedness, groaning aloud, it's actually referencing a specific law.
The one prohibiting Ammonites and Moabites from entering the assembly of the Lord, even down to the 10th generation. And Jeremiah uses this to make a powerful statement about the Babylonians who sacked the temple.
He's saying they committed a greater offense than even those ancient enemies.
Exactly, elevating their actions to a whole new level. And the commentary notes, this law wasn't about excluding all Gentiles. It specifically prohibited them from the tabernacle or temple, the most sacred space.
Protecting the sanctity of that space, even centuries later. The commentary mentions how the post-exilic community reacted when they discovered Tobiah the Ammonite had been given living quarters in the temple. Outraged.
They took this seriously. Those ancient laws still held power. Speaking of layers, there's that detail in 1.15 about the virgin daughter Judah.
Yeah, what's the significance there? It seems like more than just a description.
It's an epithet, emphasizing Judah's purity, innocence, making the violence even more shocking.
So like contrast between innocence and brutality, highlighting the injustice.
Precisely. This wasn't just any city. This was a place devoted to God and look. And in 1.19, the commentary points out the conjunction kai.
Okay, conjunctions aren't usually that exciting. What's special about ki?
Multiple meanings in Hebrew, creating ambiguity. It could refer to a past event, like when they searched for food, or it could be concessive, although they searched.
So either way, emphasizing the futility of their efforts. They searched, but it didn't save them.
Exactly. And there's a third possibility. K can also be used for emphasis, like, surely they searched for food to keep alive, adding to the tragedy, their struggle for survival.
Heartbreaking. And then 1.20, that visceral imagery again, my bowels burn.
Ah.
Sounds a bit alarming.
Right. But it's a Hebrew idiom, severe stomach distress, probably a
So
euphemism.
not literal burning then.
No, figurative.
Yeah.
Conveying the intensity of their suffering, both physical and emotional. There's another idiom there too. My heart is pounding inside me, expressing turmoil, like their heart's trying to escape.
Amazing how these ancient expressions still resonate. And in 2.1, the writer continues to personify Jerusalem, those feminine epithets.
Daughter Zion, the virgin daughter of Judah, reinforcing the city as a woman, a young, innocent woman who's been violated.
Makes the destruction feel so much more personal, like an attack on someone you care about. And in 2.2, the commentary highlights the specific word used for destroyed, bala.
Bala means complete demolition, nothing left. Not just damage, annihilation.
And in 2.6, there's something about the phrase his booth.
His booth is another way to describe the temple. The commentary says the Hebrew word sak is a hapax legomenon. It only appears this one time in the entire Hebrew Old Testament.
Wow, that's incredible. Seems like a deliberate choice.
It does, and it suggests Jeremiah chose this word to emphasize the temple's fragility, its vulnerability, like saying even God's house, this permanent structure, was just temporary, easily destroyed.
A reminder that nothing is immune to destruction. And that vulnerability is there in 2.8, where the city gates are sinking, like they're dying.
The gates, once symbols of strength, now collapsing. And to drive home the point, another Mubal Hendiady is in, he has destroyed and smashed her bars.
The commentary points out that it intensifies the forcefulness, the humiliation, a tearing down of everything.
Exactly. And 2.11, eyes worn out from weeping. Kala, it's not just crying, it's like the eyes are drained, exhausted from grief.
Like they've reached the point where even tears can't express it anymore. And then that idiom again, my bowels burn.
Grief isn't just emotional, it's physical. And in 2.12, the cry to God, look and see the suffering of the daughters in my city. The commentary highlighting the plight of the women, often the most vulnerable.
A whole other dimension of suffering. Grief and loss are experienced so differently.
Absolutely. And as we move into chapter 3, a shift in the acrostic structure.
Right. Now, all three lines in each verse start with the same letter, like the intensity is building. And the commentary mentions the debate about the speaker, soldier, universal figure.
Interesting question. Personal lament or a collective cry? Perhaps both. One voice, but a universal experience.
Adds complexity. And in 3.3, we see to turn the hand against, again.
Active aggression, deliberate turning away, the ultimate rejection, abandoned by those you depend on.
And 3.4, my mortal skin. Another way of highlighting vulnerability, fragility.
Exactly. We're all mortal, susceptible to pain. And that vulnerability is emphasized in 3.13, God shooting arrows into the kidneys.
The commentary said kidneys were linked to emotions in Hebrew thought. Not just physical, but attacking the emotional core.
Powerful way to express the all-encompassing nature of suffering. And then a glimmer of hope, 3.22, waiting and silently.
Strengthen that, the ability to endure, find solace and stillness, even when everything's falling apart.
The resilience of the human spirit makes you wonder, what are they waiting for? Just the end of pain or something more?
Leads to one of the most challenging verses, 3.38. Is not from the mouth of the Most High that both calamities and good things come. God is the source of both.
Difficult. The commentary says it's not about God enjoying suffering, but that he has ultimate control.
A lot to process. But that's what makes Lamentations so compelling. It doesn't shy away from tough questions. Faith, suffering, God's role.
We've talked about individual grief, but as we move to chapter 4, the focus shifts to the community. Societal breakdown, the devaluation of what was precious, utter desperation.
Like that image in 4.10.
Yeah.
Mothers driven to cannibalism. The complete collapse of everything they held dear.
Suffering doesn't just affect individuals, it impacts communities. And in chapter 5, this collective suffering is expressed through a communal lament, a cry for justice.
It's not just one voice crying out anymore. It's the voice of an entire people, united in their grief and their longing.
Exactly. And as we explore this lament, we'll see the themes of justice, accountability, and hope take center stage.
It's amazing how Lamentations takes us on this journey. Personal grief to this communal outcry. We've uncovered so much, and it's really striking how these ancient words still feel so relevant today.
The power of poetry, right? It speaks to those universal experiences. And in this last chapter, we see the community coming together, voicing their pain, anger, their longing for justice.
And even though it's a communal voice now, the writer doesn't let up on the powerful imagery. In chapter 5, verse 1, the commentary points out, remember, Lord, what has happened to us. It's not just a casual reminder.
It's more of a legal term. bringing into mind a courtroom, evidence being presented. They're making their case before God, demanding he see their suffering.
So it's an appeal for justice. Look what's been done, this isn't right. And in verse 6, they cry out, "We have extended our hand to Egypt and Assyria to get enough bread."
Showing their desperation, turning to their former enemies for help. The commentary suggests it also points to a breakdown of their covenant with God.
Like, we've tried everything, even compromising our faith, and we're still suffering. And verse 7, "Our fathers sin and are no more, and we bear their iniquities."
The question of generational sin, accepting responsibility, or testing the injustice of being punished for what they didn't do.
A question that resonates throughout history, something many still grapple with today, the legacy of the past.
Absolutely. In verse 9, we get a visceral image. At the risk of our lives, we get our bread because of the sword in the wilderness.
Constant danger, fighting for basic needs. Finding food is life or death. And verse 19, the commentary highlights the word shove, to turn or to return.
A powerful expression of longing for restoration, for themselves and their relationship with God. True healing requiring turning back, change, reconciliation.
So even in this final lament, a glimmer of hope, a recognition that things can be different. But it's not passive, it's a call to action. Not waiting for God to fix everything, but seeking a way back.
That's the challenge Lamentations leaves us with. It's not just about grief, it's a call to engage with faith, justice, responsibility, to lament, to wrestle with the tough questions, to work towards a future where suffering isn't the end.
A powerful message. Lamentations isn't just an ancient text, it's alive, speaks to the human experience. It's okay to grieve, to be angry, to question, but there's always hope.
And sometimes that hope is in the lament itself. Giving voice to pain creates space for healing. We connect with others. We imagine a different future.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through Lamentations. We hope this deep dive gave you new insights into this powerful text. May we all find the courage to lament, the strength to endure, and the hope to believe in a better tomorrow.